Okay, today we're going to be looking at section 9.4, which is factoring to solve quadratic equations. Hopefully by the end of this lesson you can say that I can solve a quadratic equation by factoring. Okay, so the first thing that we should talk about or need to talk about is something called the zero product property. So they say A times B is 0. So if I know A times B is 0, which means a number times another number is 0, if I have two numbers that multiply together to give 0, I know that either A has to be 0, B has to be 0, or they both could be 0. So what we are going to use then, we're going to use this property. So if I had these two things multiplied together, and that guy gave me 0, I know that either this has to be 0 or this has to be 0. And if we knew that, we could then solve these and say, okay, if I subtract the 3, I know that x would have to be equal to a negative 3. Or if I subtract the 2, I know that x would have to be equal to a negative 2. So one of these two things would solve this original equation. So if I put in a negative 3 plus 3 is 0, plus negative 3 plus 1, or excuse me, negative plus 2 would be a negative 1. So 0 times a negative 1 is 0. If I put in a negative 2, negative 2 plus 3 is 1. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0. So a 1 plus or times 0 is 0. So it does work. So what are we going to have to do today? Well, the first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to solve some of these equations. So first thing we do, if that's the equation, I know that either that one's equal to 0 or this one's equal to 0. And to solve it, I would simply minus 1. So x is equal to a negative 1 here. Or if I add a 5, I'd get x is equal to a 5. Okay, so this next one, either 2x plus 3 is equal to 0 or x minus 4 is equal to 0. If we start with this one, I would add 4 and I'd get x is equal to a 4. This one, it's going to take me a couple steps. Minus 3, I get 2x equals negative 3. Divide by the 2 and x is equal to a negative 3 over 2 or negative 1.5. Okay, the next two, either 2y plus 1 is equal to 0 or y plus 14 is equal to 0. So if I subtract the 1 here, I get 2y equals a negative 1 divided by the 2, and you get y is equal to a negative 1/2. Okay, if I subtract the 14 here, I get y is equal to a negative 14. Okay, so you try this last one. Pause the video, try this last one, see what you can do. Okay, and you should have gotten, if you subtract or solve these two separate equations, if I add 2 here, I get 7n is equal to a 2. Divide by a 7 and you get n is equal to a 2/7. Okay, if I add 4 here, I get 5n is equal to 4, and then divide by the 5, and you get y is equal to a 4/5. Okay, or I should say n, not a y, but this one was an n. Divided by 5, and this was n equals to 4/5. Okay, very good. Okay, but now what if you are given equations that are not factored? So then the first thing we got to do is be able to factor them. So we might need a little side scratch piece of paper. So I got an m squared minus 14. So we got to remember how to factor. Well, I know it's going to be an m and an m. If I were to look at my signs, I could tell that I know I'm going to have a negative and a positive. So I know I could have a negative and a positive. So now, got to think back to factoring. Got to have two things to multiply together to give you negative 14. So factors of a negative 14, like negative 1 and 14, a 2, negative 2, and a 7. And they got to add up to a negative 5. Well, I know that these add up to a positive 5, so then it must be a positive 2 and a negative 7. So this would be a positive 2n and m, sorry, and a negative 7m. So this would be a negative 7 and positive 2. So I'd have an m plus 2, m minus 7, and then I just separate them out. So I'd add 7, and I get m is equal to a 7. subtract 2, you get n is equal to a negative 2. Okay, very good. Now if I do the next one, so I've got a p squared, I got a negative 20, so I know I'm going to have a p and a p. I know one's going to be a positive, one's going to be a negative. So they got to multiply together, give you negative 20. So like a negative 1 and a 20, a negative 2 and a 10, negative 4 and a 5, and they got to add up to a positive 1. So this would be my 2, so I'd have a negative 4p here, a positive 5p, I'd have a plus 5, I'd have a negative 4. So minus 4 plus 5, and then we just separate those out. P minus 4 is equal to 0, or p plus 5 is equal to a 0. And I'd have a p is equal to a, after I add the 4, I'd get p is equal to a positive 4. Or if I subtract 5, I'd have p is equal to a negative 5. Okay, and I should have circled my answers over here. So now, next one, we got a factor. I got 2a squared. I got a positive 18. I got a negative 15. So I know these are going to both be minuses. Okay, so let's do this AC method again. So I got 2 times an 18, and I'd get a 36. So now factors of 36 that add up to a negative 15. So negative 1, nope, sorry, yes, negative 1, negative 36. A negative 2 and a negative 18. A negative 3 and a negative 12. Well, if I stop there, I know that this would be my lucky winner. So I get a negative 3a, a negative 12a, and if I just erase this so I have a little more room. So then we look for what's common both ways. I look for what's common here, and I know that's an a. What's common here? That's a negative 6. I would factor out. And then common this way would be a 2a. Common this way would be a negative 3. If I check all my boxes would all work. So I've got my two factors, an a minus 6 and a 2a minus 3. Then all we got to do is finish by solving. So either this one's equal to 0, so I'd add a 6, and I have a is equal to a 6. Or on this one, I'd add 3, and I'd get 2a equals a 3, divide by the 2, and you get a is equal to a 1.5, or 3 over 2, however you want to write your answer would be acceptable. Okay, so those would be your two answers for that one. So now, how would I go about doing this one? Well, if it says x squared plus 14x equals negative 49, the first thing you would have to do is move the 49 over so it's in standard form. So x squared plus 14x plus 49 equals 0. So however you got to factor it, you can use the box. So I got an x and an x. I got a 49, so a 7 and a 7, that would give you 7x and a 7x, which should give you the 14x. So I got an x plus 7, x plus 7. So either this one's equal to 0 or this one's equal to 0. They're both the same thing, and you'd get x is equal to a negative 7 on both of them. Okay, so your solution would be x equals negative 7. So one final note you want to write down, steps to solving by factoring would be this. First thing, get it in standard form. Like that last one we saw, we had to move something across. So we moved it across, so we had it in standard form. Okay, then we factor, which we've been doing here. And then the last thing is use the zero product property to solve the equation. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense to you. Make sure you come with questions tomorrow if we have them. And that is a wrap.